Hello and welcome to the Efficio podcast. This is episode 6 now in our series of podcasts looking at the issues around procurement and supply chain that have been thrown up by this present COVID-19 crisis. And today's topic is supply negotiations. So I'm very pleased to be joined by, in fact, a couple of our colleagues for a change, Greg and Tibor. So gentlemen, would you mind introducing yourself? Perhaps Greg first.
Yes, hi, thanks Simon. Yeah, Greg Horgan. I'm a senior manager at Efficio. I've been with Efficio for 6 years now.
Fantastic. Tibor?
Hi, this is Tibor. I'm senior manager at Efficio. I'm with the company for 7 years now, and now for 46 days locked down in my apartment in Barcelona.
Well, thank you, Tibor. Thank you, Greg. Today's topic is all about supply negotiations, and I can well imagine if there are suppliers, especially listening to this podcast, they'll be groaning, thinking, "Oh, supply negotiations in COVID, that just means you're going to come and bash me over the head on price." Tibor, what do you think to that? Is that fair?
No, not at all. I can say that all these negotiations are conducted in the spirit of collaboration and long-term business partnership. You don't really have time to run a competitive process and lengthy negotiations. So we need to be quick and need to work a good spirit of collaboration. First thing which normally we do before starting the negotiations is to segment the clients into at least 3 categories. Of course, from the beginning, we exclude all the non-active spend, which is travel or meal vouchers, which are not being used today. And the rest of the suppliers we segment to one category would be suppliers who are healthy financially and who have a reasonably solid business. Then the second group would be the suppliers who are impacted by the crisis, but they are surviving. And the third group would be the suppliers who need our help, and we need to give them lifeline to survive during the crisis. Yeah. So basically, that's how we then tailor the negotiations with the suppliers.
Fantastic. It makes sense, Tibor. And Greg, I guess if I'm a procurement person listening to that, which seems eminently sensible, how do I make it happen? Who runs them? What are the keys to kind of delivering successfully?
Thanks, Simon. Given the dramatic impact on revenues for a large number of companies, it's important to act quickly. So there are really 3 key phases to deliver this successfully. So there's internal alignment, there's a preparation phase, and then there's the execution. To get the internal alignment, you really need senior sponsorship from the very top of the organisation. And to get this, you need to be really clear on the approach, and as Tibor explained. And you need to give senior management assurance that you're going to go through a considered supplier segmentation process and that any risks in the supplier base are going to be actively managed. That same message needs to be given to stakeholders so that they know that their supplier base is being looked after and that you're not there to, as you say, just kick them.
Yeah.
And then finally, in the internal alignment, when you're engaging with key suppliers, the consistent messaging is key. And this means agreeing communications and what information you can share with suppliers needs to be signed off at a senior level before you engage. In relation to the preparation, in this environment, it's important that we are strengthening the relationship with suppliers. So the first thing you want to do is you want to set up a meeting with them. You don't want to make any demands of them via email. You want to bring them to the table so that it's a collaborative process to identifying the opportunities. It is important that the supplier understands the purposes of the meeting and that they come armed with ideas and proposals too. And on the other side, our team has done their homework prior to the meetings so that they've got specific levers to discuss with the suppliers so that we have a productive meeting in order to identify the opportunities and options. And all of this is agreed in a preparation phase where we're doing this with stakeholders. And finally, when we move into execution, once the ball is rolling on the negotiations, there's going to be a lot of moving parts. You're going to have a lot of suppliers you're talking to. So it's very important to follow, a very structured, well-documented process. And, we use a central database, keeping track of all the discussions you've had, all the sourcing levers that you've identified. And that central database is also responsible for tracking. So it's also your repository for tracking what you've discussed with suppliers. And then finally, in terms of actually having the negotiations, typically it's procurement who hold these discussions. However, in some cases, it'll be business stakeholders who prefer to do that due to their relationships already with the supplier.
Great. Thank you, Greg. And then I guess the object of any negotiation in this period especially is to navigate the storm and for both parties to get through safely. To both Tibor and Greg, do you see any long-term impact of these negotiations, and is there anything else companies could be doing right now? Tibor, if we could start with you.
Yeah, so of course, our focus is on the short term, and as you said, to navigate through the storm. However, we have made positive long-term structural changes as well. So this crisis provides a very good opportunity for tidying up the house and make some housekeeping. Basically, best example maybe unused licenses, softwares which can be scaled back, temp labor which can be do internally, and so on and so on. So I believe part of these measures, especially on the demand side, will stay, and some companies will incorporate this housekeeping activity in their yearly routine practice.
And I think to build on what Tibor said, although there are a number of spend areas that are currently non-active, so we talked about travel, for example, it doesn't mean that you should be doing nothing in these categories. There are housekeeping opportunities, and there's an opportunity to get the demand and processes right for when things do return to normal. In 12 months' time, you might be kicking yourself that you didn't take the chance, and there was a slowdown in terms of your supplier engagement, to get the internal governance and processes right now that you've got the opportunity.
Greg, Tibor, thank you so much. That's been a really interesting conversation. Certainly very enlightening for myself, and I'm sure very useful for our listeners. So thank you both so much. As always, for people listening to this, thank you. If you had any questions or comments on the things that we discussed, please get in touch via the LinkedIn or the usual channels. But again, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. For those listening, thank you. And our next podcast will be coming out in due course.
Thank you.
Thank you.